Mark is the founder. Should I use founder, Mark? Are you okay with that?
Whatever you like, brother, whatever you like.
Mark is the founder of Live and Let Live, an organization trying to promote the idea of peace in the world. The Live and Let Live organization categorizes itself as the World Peace Movement, and the only world real peace movement. And Mark is a lawyer, is a practicing lawyer for Attorneys for Freedom in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. And he has been a very good friend for some time now. And he's a libertarian, and he's to a larger extent a peace advocate. And now he's going to be contesting for Senate in the US under the Libertarian Party in 2023, right?
That's true. 2022 this year.
Exactly, my brother. So, Marc, ladies and gentlemen, Marc Victor, take it away, Marc.
Okay, everybody. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure and an honor to speak to my brothers and sisters in Africa. And I want to talk to you today about Live and Let Live. And Live and Let Live, it's actually a global peace movement. It's just getting ready to kick off. We don't kick off until March of 2023, but we already have chapters all over the world. And Leonard's doing a great job in Africa, starting his chapter. And put simply, we advocate for live and let live. We really believe in that phrase. We think it's the only way to actually achieve global peace. Now, we stay really true to the literal meaning of live and let live. That's what we believe, live and let live. There's really only two parts to the analysis here. Number one, live, and number two, let live. And so let's just talk about them briefly. What on earth could live mean? Well, you probably can figure this out, right? Live your life. We think you are in charge of your life. You're entitled to make decisions over your life. What does that mean? It means you're entitled to both define and pursue your happiness. You get to decide what makes you happy, and you get to pursue your happiness. The way I like to say it is you should be the unapologetic, iron-fisted dictator of your mind, in your body, in your property, and all of your money and your time. Said briefly, you're in charge of you, and I'm in charge of me. That's what live means. But we can make suggestions to each other, right? I can suggest things to you, and you can suggest things to me. And we're, of course, each free to reject the other's suggestions. But Live and Let Live, the movement, is actually making some suggestions. We have some things to say in this space. We're advocating for what we call aspirational values as part of our moral principle. Yeah, we have a moral principle. Live and Let Live has a moral principle. And let me describe it for you right now. We like to describe it as simply, be a good human. You know what that means. If you had a good parent who raised you, you probably have a very good idea of what it means to be a good human. So we call these our aspirational values, and I'm going to tell you about them right now. The first one is open-mindedness. Yeah, you should be open-minded to other people and how they live. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that they say or do, but you should at least be open-minded to other people and how they live and what they say, those kinds of things. We also think tolerance is very important. I like to describe this as sort of legal tolerance. It doesn't mean you need to tolerate what anything anybody does, but we need to be tolerant of how other people live their lives. They may live differently than we do. It's okay. We also are promoting voluntary kindness. This is important to distinguish from involuntary or forced kindness. That's not real kindness. Real kindness comes from the heart, right? It's what you do when you don't have to do. It's voluntary. And that's something we're promoting. Be kind to other people. just because you want to be kind. Also, civility. We're missing some civility in the world right now. We should be able to agree to disagree. Even if we disagree on things, we should do it in a civilized way, right? We're all brothers and sisters. We should treat each other that way. And also justice. Justice is very important. In truth and facts, whatever the truth and facts are, wherever they go, we should be committed to finding truth and facts. Also very important, one of our aspirational values is to build high levels of trust with other human beings. Something I already know about you guys, even though I haven't met you yet. Your best relationships with other people, those are the ones where you have high levels of trust. And your worst relationships, those are the ones where you have low levels of trust. So one of our aspirational values, these are suggestions, right? Things that you can completely ignore. It's to build high levels of trust. Do what you say you are going to do. Why do we care about any of this stuff? Well, we care about it because what we want to do in this space with the moral principle is to optimize human happiness and well-being. We want more people on the planet to live happy and to be well. And what we want to do is minimize suffering, right? There's suffering in the world. We know we're not going to have a perfect world, but we want to minimize it as much as we can. So that's what we say about live. That's what live means. You're in charge of you. You're in charge of your life, your body, your money, your property, your time, your mind. That's yours. But we have some suggestions, things that we're promoting in this space, the things I just discussed. Be a good human. Okay, well, the only thing left to live and let live is the second part, which is let live. Now, let live, sometimes when I write it, I put an exclamation point after let live, because this isn't a suggestion. You have to let people live. What does it mean to let other people live? Well, we just talked about what it means to live. It means you're the iron-fisted dictator of you. So to let live means you got to let other people do exactly what it is you have a right to do, which is live. You got to let other people live. Or said a different way, you need to recognize and allow others to have the same right to be the iron-fisted dictator of their lives, right? We're all in charge of us, right? You're in charge of you, I'm in charge of me. So that's the cost of achieving peace. That's the part that we have to really internalize to understand. The world is filled right now with people who don't want to let other people live. They want to force their way of life on other people. They want to tell you what you should eat maybe and how you should live and what you should spend money on and how you should spend your time. We got to stop with that. We got to let other people make those decisions for themselves. That's the cost of achieving peace. If you don't want to pay that cost, well, we can't get to peace, okay? So nobody has the right to aggress against another person. And the reason is because it violates the live and let live mandate, right? When you aggress against another person, you're not letting that person be in charge of themselves. So from this, we get what we like to call our legal principle. Well, a law is different than a moral principle, right? Moral ideas, you can ignore them. Those are suggestions. Legal ideas, okay, these are laws. You have to comply with the law. And we think we're in favor of laws, obviously. We're for law and order as well. And so the way we describe the legal principle is very simple. Don't be an aggressor. Don't be an aggressor. That should always be against the law. So what's an aggressor? Okay, well, an aggressor is somebody who initiates force against another person or their property. We're saying the law should always prohibit that. Also, somebody who engages in fraud. This is basically stealing from another person through trickery. This is also an aggression and should be against the law. Also, coercion, when you use force or threaten force against another person to get them to do something. That's being an aggressor. And then the final category of being an aggressor is doing something, anything, that creates a big risk of harm to another person. That's also aggression, and the law should prohibit that. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean here. Maybe driving a vehicle down the road while you're drunk so bad that maybe you're on the wrong side of the road. Okay, you haven't hit somebody yet, but you're presenting a big risk of harm to another person. And what we're saying in the Live and Let Live movement is you should not be allowed to do that. Or said another way, the law should prohibit that. Firing your gun up into the air, recklessly into the sky. Okay, this is presenting a risk to other people. There are many things that you could probably think of that create substantial risks to other people. The reason this is aggression is because other people have to stop what they're doing in their lives and deal with the risk that is being created by this other person. You're interfering with another person. You're not allowing them to live their lives. And so what we're saying here in this space with the legal principle is all laws should be in harmony with that legal principle, right? So if a law is consistent with don't use force or fraud or coercion or create a substantial risk, it's a good law and we should keep it. Some examples of these are laws against murder, laws against theft, laws against fraud, laws against assault and trespass. These are all consistent with don't be an aggressor. Laws against, say, smoking marijuana, well, there's no aggression here, so we would say that's a bad law. Laws against gambling, bad law. Laws about how you should spend your money, bad law, because they're not stopping aggression. That's what we're saying. You should be left alone to live your life unless you're an aggressor. So said another way, do whatever you want with your body, property, money, time, in your mind. Think about whatever you want. Only one thing you can't do, and that's just be an aggressor. Don't be an aggressor. That's what we're saying with the Live and Let Live movement. Very importantly, we think that this legal principle applies to everybody. Doesn't matter if you live in Africa or you live in Europe or you live in North America or South America, wherever you live, whatever color your skin is, wherever you were born, whether you're rich or poor, tall or short, whatever. We don't care what language you speak, what foods you eat. The rules should apply to everybody equally, exactly the same way. Also very important is sometimes people form groups, right? Leonard and I and Maria may form a little group of 3 people, but we don't get to violate the rule just because we formed a group. That doesn't make any sense. And even if it's a big group, a big organization, or even a corporation, why would we want corporations to violate the legal principle? I certainly don't, and we should never allow that. And especially this rule should apply to the biggest group of all, which is the government. If you really think about it, why would we ever want the government to be an aggressor, to engage in force against people with not self-defense? Self-defense isn't an initiation of force. Self-defense is a response to another person's use of force. That's perfectly fine. It's the aggression, it's the initiation of force. Why would we ever want the government to initiate force against people or to be engaged in fraud or coercion or to do anything to create a substantial risk of harm to other people? So this rule applies to the government and all corporations and all groups. That's what we're saying in the Live and Let Live movement. Now, to be fair about it, there can be some very hard questions in figuring out how the legal principle applies. There are many such hard questions. I've made my life as a lawyer really working on a lot of these hard questions. And what a hard question means is reasonable people who understand the Live and Let Live principle and what it is we're saying might still disagree on how this rule applies. An example I like to use sometimes is the question of abortion. This is an issue where reasonable people disagree. Some people say, well, the live and let live legal principle should protect the unborn baby from the moment of conception. Other people say, no, that's too early. It should be later, at a point that we might call viability, when the baby is able to survive outside the mother's womb. I don't know the answer to this. Nobody knows. There is no right answer to this. There's reasonable people who disagree. Okay, so when this happens, what we say is very simple. Let's let the smallest community make the decision. We don't need one big rule, that one size fits all rule for everybody. We say let the smallest community, maybe a local town or city or even a village, decide for themselves which version of that rule is the best version, right? Because you're going to get a rule that's at least a reasonable construction of the live and let live rule. And there's great benefits to letting the smallest communities decide. Well, first off, this is the best way to find which rule is actually the better rule. Because when the smaller communities decide for themselves, it's very easy for people who don't like that rule to move to the next town, right? You can still see your family, keep your job. You just move to a different town with a different rule. So we like putting the hard issues, not a one size fits all, let the whole country suffer, but put it in a smaller community and let those people in those community who might feel the same way about it, might feel differently. People in different parts of the world have different concerns about different issues sometimes. What's a substantial risk of harm here in the United States might be different than in another part of the world. That's okay. We can figure that out community to community. What we're really teaching people here with the Live and Let Live movement is how to think about the issues, right? Because issues come up all the time. There will be issues that come up in the future we haven't even thought about yet. The issue here is, how do we think about these issues? That's really important. That's what we're teaching people with Live and Let Live. And what we're suggesting is the way people ought to think about these is look at the issue and then say to yourself, is somebody violating that legal principle here? Is somebody being an aggressor? Because if somebody's being an aggressor, what we're saying in the Live and Let Live movement is that should always be illegal. We're against it. We want to stop it immediately. We're against aggression. If nobody is violating the legal principle, well, then what we're saying is this should be legal. It doesn't mean we think it's a good idea. We might decide this is immoral, this is unwise, this is unhealthy. Maybe it's not the best way to live. We might try to convince people to live otherwise. But if they're not being aggressors, that's the cost for freedom and peace. We should say this conduct is legal. And really, because they're not violating the Live and Let Live rule. We should all understand and agree that perfection just isn't an option, right? We're not living in a utopia. It's not a perfect world. What we want to do is get closer to that perfect world. We want to get closer to more freedom for more people and more peace for more people. Now, some people agree with this idea of Live and Let Live for different reasons, right? We don't want to argue about this. Some people say because of their religion, and we do a podcast called Peace Radicals, and I've had Christians on the show who say, Mark, yes, my religion leads me to live and let live. I've also had Muslims on the show. If you watch Peace Radicals, we had a guest. His name is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's a doctor here in the United States, and he's a Muslim. And his position is, Islam leads me to live and let live. Other people take different positions. Some people like a concept called natural rights and natural law. And they say, well, because of natural law, that's what leads me to live and let live. Other people are what we call social contractarians. They imagine a social contract between humans. Okay, that's fine. They may argue that that's why they get to live and let live. Other people who I know, like free market Economics. I know there's people at this conference who are probably very pro free market economics, and that's why they get to live and let live. The reason I get to live and let live is a different reason entirely. It just seems right to me. It just seems absolutely obvious that live and let live is the right rule. Other people are maybe followers of Ayn Rand who like objectivism, and they might get to live and let live that way. We don't care. That's the point I'm trying to make here. How you get to live and let live isn't a concern of ours. Only that you get to live and let live. We don't care why somebody agrees with live and let live, so long as they agree. So let me tell you some things that we don't argue about in the live and let live movement. For example, the government. We don't really say much about the government in the live and let live movement, other than to say, look, the government doesn't get to violate the legal principle. They should be held to the same rules that you and I are held to. They shouldn't be aggressors. That's all I really need to say about government. Whatever else they do, I don't care. As long as they're not aggressing against people, it doesn't matter. So we don't argue about what the proper size of government is or what type of government somebody should have in a country. We don't care about that. As long as that government is peaceful and doesn't aggress, we're totally fine with that. You might be surprised to also hear that we don't argue about capitalism or socialism. I know a lot of people like socialism. Well, that's okay, as long as they don't violate that live and let live legal principle. It could be violated with capitalism as well. You may have heard the phrase crony capitalism. Well, crony capitalism is when maybe people give money to politicians who then change the law to benefit one group or one corporation over another. This is crony capitalism, and it violates the live and let live legal principle because it involves coercion, right? They force groups or companies to do certain things or not to do certain things. That's out because it violates the rule. Free market capitalism, however, there's no violation of the rule. This is just the free market. It's something I love, but free market capitalism is perfectly fine and consistent with live and let live because it doesn't violate the rule. Well, the same could be said about socialism. If people want to get together and pool their money in a fund and pay for bills together, no problem. The rule isn't violated here. Only when they drag people into it who don't want to be part of it. So if Leonard and I make some agreement to put our money together and to pay bills, that's fine. But if we tell you, you have to be part of it, and we're taking your money and putting it in the group of the bundle of our money and paying things, well, now we're violating the rule. We're initiating force against you. So involuntary socialism violates the legal principle, and we're against it. Also, implementation. There can be hard questions about how we implement live and let live. I've got some ideas. Leonard probably has some ideas. That's fine. We don't argue about the best way to implement live and let live. When we get there, when we get enough people in the world where we can start implementing live and let live, fantastic. We'll implement it in the way that's the smartest way to implement it. People can disagree about that. That's fine. We're not looking for reasons to argue with people right now. Also, how best to transition to a free and peaceful society with all the craziness we have now. What should we stop first? What should we do first? These are transition questions. We don't argue about that either. We're not looking to argue with people. What we want is for people to understand how to think about the issues. And what we want them thinking about is, does it violate the legal principle? And if it does, it should be illegal. And if it doesn't, it should be legal. And we want to inspire people to act consistently with that moral principle. So what we tell people, and I'm going to take some questions here in just a minute, but what we tell people is to live the message. We had our big meeting this weekend with the leaders of all the chapters around the world. We had a bunch of people from Africa and Europe and other people in Canada and Australia and a bunch of people in the US. And what we tell people is to live the message. Be an example for other people. Don't just talk about the moral principle, live it. Don't just say voluntary kindness, participate in it. Actually be kind to other people. So if this message that I've talked about today, this live and let live movement, if this makes sense to you, and I hope it does, then I would say, welcome to the movement. You're a live and let liver. And what I'd love you to do is just join the movement. No big deal. Just go to liveandletlive.org. Check out the movement there. Put your name and your email address so we can stay in touch with you. You're a member of the Live and Let Live movement. You're a member of a global community. And then also, very importantly, I'd ask you to share the content to your social media. Blast it around. Tell people about Live and Let Live. Encourage them to join the movement. We've got 2 really good podcasts. One is Peace Radicals. Maria was on Peace Radicals. We recorded an episode yesterday. This really focuses much on the legal principle. Andy Marcantel, who's another lawyer, he's a partner of mine and a very important, one of the founders of the Live and Let Live movement. He and I interview different guests on Peace Radicals, and we talk about the legal principle. And Maria, who's the executive director of the Live and Let Live Foundation, she does an Instagram version of a podcast that she calls Peace Talks, where she's inspiring people on the moral principle. She's focusing on that moral principle. Also, you can start a chapter like Leonard has. If you can join Leonard's chapter or start your own chapter if you live in a different area, no problem. We'll help you get started. Really easy. You can also donate your time to the movement or money to the movement or join a committee. Help us get ready for the big launch in 2023. We've got several different committees. So anyway, I would invite you to check out more at liveandletlive.org. And that's really all I have to say. I'm happy to take some questions. I just leave you with we use the Hawaiian shaka as our symbol. And I would just say, live and let live, everybody. And thank you so much for your time and attention.